Morgan here at winterwarfare.com, where it does not matter what your rank is, the standards are the same. So at winterwarfare.com, we help guys just like you every day be more prepared to fight and win in the cold. And that's my main mission. Today I'm going to talk to you about several things like operations, thinking bigger, looking at how a superior force plans war, and looking at your area of operations and increasing your area of operations. What are my qualifications for this? Well, I'm former infantry and airborne. I also have an economics degree, and I guess you could say I'm an analyst. I've been in business for a long time, and I've managed hundreds of millions of dollars. And if anything, when it comes to war planning, that's what business is: planning, directing, and motivating. Today I will show you just a few key areas from operations, or FM 100-5, to show you how a superior force at a higher echelon coordinates war and plans for winning war. My goal in this will be to show you that you and your small team may at times, when or if possible, may need to also work with other units or a higher echelon to accomplish strategic tasks in a shit-hit-the-fan situation or to counter an act of aggression by a bad actor. Regardless, I want to show you battle planning is a complex, multidimensional, dynamic, ongoing event. I will also discuss counterinsurgency and a few key takeaways from FM 3-24 to show you, the smaller force, how a superior force will act and think to stop you. We are going to look at area of operations. I'm going to have you evaluate your AO and the need to increase your area of operations in regards to tactical operations. As we do this, I will show the need to have the right equipment to fight in all weather 24/7. And you will want to stick around because I'm going to show you several unsuspecting cities in the US where just 2 hours away or 120 miles away, you will find a much different climate. Lastly, this is all going to tie with having the right gear, where terrain and weather from MET-TC are the biggest physical factors affecting combat operations. So I will have a heavy emphasis today on the terrain weather aspect of MET-TC and the need to have cold weather gear. Why are we talking about this? Pick one of 1,000 reasons, but let's say China invaded, then took over Congress and passed anti-gun laws, or let's say a communist global organization wants you to own nothing and like it, or takes away your ability to farm, makes you get a chip to get your grasshopper ration. Even the United States government itself has detailed continuity of government plans, like Rex 84 or Presidential Executive Directive 51. So it would be wise for you to do the same and have a plan. Because of the Second Amendment in America, in many ways, America is the last stand globally to stop the red disease and all of its many forms. It's serious business. It will be the greatest show on earth, and it will be winner take all. Like the sword of Damocles, an illusion epitomizing the imminent and ever-present peril faced by those in positions of power. Damocles was a courtier in the court of King Dionysus, and he wanted to be king. And Damocles went to the king and he said, geez, I would really like to be king. So what the king did was he hung a sword over the king's chair and told Damocles, you could be king for the day. And by that sword was just a simple horsehair. And after a few hours, Damocles decided it was too stressful, that sitting in that chair with the sword dangling over him with only one fine horsehair was just too much to handle. And he realized that for those in power, it's an ever-going struggle to have to deal with the enormous amount of pressure. To win, it's going to take a coordinated effort, an operations plan, going on the offense, and having the right gear to get the job done 24/7, including in the cold, as I just mentioned, which I will give you some examples today. But my point is there is much more to winning than just simply clearing a few houses. Before we get started, I want to quickly give two examples of insurgency battles that changed all of history. Both went against superior forces, but one insurgent army had a coordinated battle plan, and the other had limited coordination. The Saxons and the Saxon Wars were played out over 30 years in the Middle Ages, around 777 AD, in what is now modern-day Germany. The Saxons were invaded by Charles the Great and the Franks, while the Saxons and the Germanic tribes collectively outnumbered Charles the Great with their vast tribes. However, the individual tribes were not coordinated enough to win. In the end, Widelking and the Saxons were forced into submission. The second example was the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, also known as the Varian disaster. It was the defeat of the Roman commander Publius Varus, who lost 3 legions forever, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, to Arminius, a Germanic officer who worked to coordinate multiple tribes to lead a revolt of the occupied land. Arminius and the Germanic tribes waited 20 years preparing for the right moment when they led Varus and his legions into a deceptive ambush. Teutoburg Forest is commonly seen as one of the most important defeats in Roman history, bringing the triumphant period of expansion under Augustus to an abrupt end and stopped Rome from ever going beyond Germany. Okay, let's look at some key parts of operations from FM 100-5. Number 1, the combined arms approach, which is synchronization of intel, logistics, and fire teams to attack targets at one point in time to overwhelm the enemy. Conflict termination. What are your goals to define victory? This is similar to an exit strategy in business. And lastly, we'll also look quickly at the purpose of offense and defense, which I will share more on in a minute. To give you a flavor of the level a superior force plans war, I'll show you a clip of Raytheon's Connecting the Joint Force for Multiple Domain Battle Space, or JADC2. C2 simply stands for Command and Control, but you can see it is about coordinating and synchronizing multiple domains of battle while collecting massive amounts of data and pushing this into a supercomputer using predictive analytics.
The battle space has changed. Our forces are contested in every domain, facing new, more menacing threats. Raytheon Intelligence in Space is connecting the joint force, from the strategic level to the tactical edge, enabling commanders and operators to understand, decide, and act across all domains and against any challenge. Our solutions and systems span every domain, from the ocean depths to cyberspace to outer space. Our expertise in artificial intelligence, pioneering work in multifunction sensors, industry-leading cybersecurity capabilities, trusted, resilient communications, and smart effectors are key enablers for realizing the JADC2 vision. We're connecting the battle space to foster near real-time mission operations through constellation management to data processing to enabling 5G networks. Our engineers are pioneering new approaches with digital engineering, DevSecOps, and open systems architecture to develop cutting-edge capabilities faster than ever before. We're applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to assist military commanders and operators with searching, processing, and fusing the petabytes of data available. We're harnessing the power of thousands of sensors, working autonomously across multiple domains to create one common operating picture of the fast-paced battle space. Our secure communications solutions are resilient and self-healing to deliver decision-making data safely and minimize the probability of intercept. Our smart effectors can collaborate in contested environments and adapt to new changes in the battle space for precision strike at a moment's notice. Raytheon Intelligence in Space Multi-Domain JADC2 Solutions connects the joint force, delivering the right data to the right people at the right time to make the right decision.
In general, you have strategic goals, operations, and tactics. Operations sits in between them. For example, our strategic goal is to stop communism. Here is our operational plan to do that. But hopefully by now you will see it will be way more than you working on your own or simply being in a defensive posture. At some point or in some circumstances, there will need to be a coordinated offense. For a superior force, every bit of battle planning is about seizing the initiative. In order to win, you must go on the offense, and unless you have some levels of a coordinated plan, at least against a superior force, this will not happen. You just cannot move the needle on defense. You will need to take offensive action, and this will also include knowing your area of operations, the terrain that may be there, and the weather patterns or conditions, as I will discuss more on in a minute. A superior forces operations planning includes the combined arms approach. As stated in FM 100-5, combined arms warfare produces effects that are greater than the sum of the individual parts. The combined arms team strives to conduct fully integrated operations in the dimensions of time, space, purpose, and resources. The enemy cannot comprehend what is happening. The enemy commander cannot communicate his intent, nor can he coordinate his actions. The sudden and devastating impact of combined arms paralyzes the enemy's response, leaving him ripe for defeat. Combined arms forces operate over increasingly large areas of the battlefield with less force density than in the past. Modern combined arms warfare puts added stress on maintaining dispersed and non-contiguous formations. Army forces overwhelm the enemy's ability to react by synchronizing indirect and direct fires from ground and air-based platforms, assaulting with armor, mechanized, air assault, and dismounted units, jamming the enemy's communications, concealing friendly operations with obscurance, and attacking from several directions at once. The goal is to confuse, demoralize, and destroy the enemy with the coordinated impact of combat power. The purpose of the offense. The main purpose of the offense is to defeat, destroy, or neutralize the enemy force. Additionally, offensive operations are undertaken to secure decisive terrain, to deprive the enemy of resources, to gain information, to deceive and divert the enemy, to hold the enemy in position, to disrupt his attack, and to set up the conditions for future successful operations. Fundamentals of the offense. The offense is the decisive form of war, while strategic, operational, or tactical considerations may require defending for a period of time. Defeat of the enemy sooner or later requires shifting to the offense. Seizure and retention of the initiative comes with the offensive action. The fundamental characteristics of offensive operations are surprise, concentration, tempo, and audacity. These characteristics are all subcomponents of initiative. The purpose of the defense. Military forces defend only until they gain sufficient strength to attack. Though the outcome of decisive combat derives from the offensive operations, it is often necessary, even advisable, to defend. Commanders choose to defend when they need to buy time, to hold a piece of key terrain, to facilitate other operations, to preoccupy the enemy in one area so friendly forces can attack him in another, or to erode enemy resources at a rapid rate while reinforcing friendly operations. Fundamentals of the defense. The immediate purpose of defensive operations is to defeat an enemy attack. Characteristics of defensive operations. Prepared positions, security, disruption, mass and concentration, and flexibility characterize defensive operations. Now I will cover just some of the key parts or concepts of counterinsurgency from FM 3-24. As with operations, as we discuss this, you can look at this discussion from two angles, from that of the counterinsurgency or larger force, and also the insurgent. So what is an insurgency? It has a political motive or goal. It is not one event or random terrorism. The number one goal is for the superior force or counterinsurgency to maintain legitimacy. The office of the presidential-elect is a great example of this. Counterinsurgency is operated more at the tactical level, but it also includes economic and political and informational elements, not just tactical. I've been around business for a long time, and I can tell you that these guys are pro-level, and making you believe XYZ is no different for them than making you want to buy a Snickers. Their goal is to identify and disrupt cells or networks. And as you look at a counterinsurgency, let's go back to our beginning example where we had a hypothetical situation where China was to invade the United States, and all of a sudden overnight we became insurgents. And in that scenario, there would still be factions or fractions of people that would still side with the superior force, if you will. So even today, if China invaded, there would still be some people that would become loyal to China. That's just a consideration for the insurgency to take into mind. So let's look at the conflict resolution model from FM 3-24. On one axis, you have strength, and on the other axis, or the bottom axis, you have time. In some cases, all an insurgency must do is create a continual problem that cannot be solved and wear down the patience of the counterinsurgents. So as you look at the conflict resolution model, you can see over time several different scenarios of the insurgency gaining strength through government inaction or the insurgency dying off. And one probable scenario could be just a stalemate. And as it was mentioned, all an insurgency must do to create that is just a continual problem. Some of the key metrics that you might want to keep in mind as you're talking about insurgency or operations or being on the offense. A conventional offense attack ratio is 3-to-1. In the urban environment, it's up to 5-to-1. A counterinsurgency is somewhere between 5-to-1 to 10-to-1, which simply means that it would take 10 counterinsurgents to defeat one insurgent. The dyad, the simplest multiple actor network, is a link between two actors. Counterinsurgency will measure network density in nodes. Network density is the proportion of links in a network relative to the total number of links possible. Network density within an insurgency indicates which groups are most capable of conducting or coordinating attack or other type of coordination. So some of the things that the counterinsurgency are also going to look for would be hubs. So if you look at the diagram there, say diagram B, for example, right off to the right of the B, you see that, that central node. That node would be considered a hub. So that node there is linked to several other nodes, but that's the hub node of that. So the counterinsurgency would essentially be, in that example diagram B there, would be looking to take out that node right in the middle. That would be a key node that they'd want to take out. A couple other key factors in counterinsurgency. A centralized network is more effective, but easier to get versus decentralized. So essentially, the more a network is centralized from the top down, that's more effective for the insurgency. However, that's also easier for the counterinsurgency to go against. The more decentralized a network is, it's harder to operate for the insurgency. However, that decentralized nature is also harder for the counterinsurgency to go against. Changes in network density can also show changes in the capabilities of an insurgency over time. An increase in network density indicates an increased likelihood that the insurgent group can conduct coordinated attacks. A decrease in network density means the group is reduced and becoming fragmented. This can be in response to actions taken by counterinsurgents. An effective counterinsurgency may eventually face only low network density subgroups. This is because high network density subgroups require only the capture of one or a few highly connected insurgents to degrade the network. So while high network density groups are the most dangerous, they are also the easiest to disrupt. One node or a very few central nodes could dominate a highly centralized network. These nodes are called hubs and can be essential for an insurgency. A less centralized network may have no single point of failure. So let's look at the example of changes to tactics based on density shift diagram. And what this is essentially showing us from left to right is how the counterinsurgency is going to try to disrupt every node of the insurgency through various operations, through cording off and searching, through snatch and grab, through food distribution. And essentially what the counterinsurgency is trying to do is look for the hubs. And the hubs are the key parts of the insurgency where they could enact a raid. Say they have a raid and they get somebody's laptop, and within that laptop is emails to 20 other people, which are 20 different nodes. And now essentially they just start tracking people down. So let's look at area of operation. An area of operation is an operational area defined by the force's commander for land, air, and naval forces conduct of combat and non-combat activities. Area of operations do not typically encompass the entire operational area of the force commander, but should be large enough for subordinate commanders to accomplish their goals, achieve objectives and missions, and to protect their forces. My point is that in order to move the needle or be effective in many cases, your AO is going to need to be more than your yard and street. It could be 2 hours away or a state away. You might have your ideas, but believe me, the bad guy will force you to address a situation in a place you never imagined or a time you never imagined. So let's look at a diagram of an area of operations to give you a little bit better visual of what's happening here. So essentially you have your area of operations, you have your area of influence, you have your area of interest, and your information environment. My goal is for you to increase your AO, or what you think is your AO, and have the right gear to operate in any weather conditions within your AO year-round. As an example, I want to start off by showing you Ukraine in comparison to the United States. The entire country is only several hours across, so in a similar way, you could also expect to fight several hours away from your current location, i.e., you need to increase what you consider your AO. Also, I want to mention using this example has nothing to do with who is right or wrong. It is only to show you a point in expanding your AO. So if you look at the map, you can see a map of Ukraine, and on that map I've imposed a 120-mile line from Kiev. Just to give you an example of what 2 hours or 120 miles looks like, in a couple slides from now, I'm going to show you several cities within the United States that have that same 2-hour mark or 120-mile mark from them, just to show you an example of what that looks like and why you might need to increase your area of operations. So let's shift gears for a minute and look at MET-TC in relation to planning, operations, and your AO. And if your AO is bigger than you thought before, you might have different terrain or weather conditions you need to deal with. As we look at MET-TC, we do this both from friendly and enemy POV. My focus is only on the terrain weather portion of mission, enemy, terrain, weather, troops, and time. FM 100-5 states that terrain and weather affect combat more than any other physical factors. Weather not only affects battlefield operations, weapons, electronic systems, but also affects the soldiers that make it all work. Commanders cannot control the weather, but they must be sensitive to the effects inclement weather has on their unit. In regards to MET-TC, or weather and the commander, you are not playing chess with only your moves. You also need to look through the lens of your enemy. A good commander will exploit your weakness. It's like playing a really good team. They aren't going to let you beat them, they will make you beat them. So for example, if I know you do not have the proper winter equipment to fight in the cold, I will take advantage of that. The one thing we know is that the bad guy does not care if it's summer or winter. Maybe he will be in your city. Maybe he will be in the mountains and you will need to address him there. And maybe it's in the winter. There are many unknowns, but maybe your city gets shelled with artillery or tanks show up there. Whatever the case, you may need to expand what you consider your AO, and then make sure you have the gear to operate there successfully, even if it's in the middle of winter. One thing to consider in your MET-TC terrain and weather planning, you might want to develop a weather matrix, as weather plays a major role on operations and equipment. You should have a general idea both on your and your opponent's capabilities or limitations. For example, how will clouds affect a drone, or how will fog affect night vision? Okay, so now I'm going to show you several cities throughout the United States, I guess you could say unsuspecting cities that might have a milder climate, where just 2 hours away or 120 miles away, the situation could be much different. So to start off with, we're going to look at Cedar Lake, Washington and Washington State. That's in the Cascade Mountains. By the way, I should back up a step. These locations are not chosen for strategic points. They're only chosen where I could gather weather data. So let's look at Cedar Lake to start off with, again in the Cascade Mountains. The winter conditions there are 20s to 30s. They get 40 inches of snow a year, and that's less than 2 hours away from the greater Seattle area with a population of 4 million people. So within 2 hours of Seattle is an area that snows 40 inches with 20-degree weather. That's something to think about. The next location we're going to look at is Haynesville, North Carolina. It's in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and Haynesville sits in between Charlotte and Knoxville. So in Haynesville, again, 20 degree to 40-degree weather, the lows to the highs, 1 to 3 inches of very wet snow. Again, that's 120 miles from Charlotte, North Carolina. Again, Haynesville sits in between Charlotte and Knoxville. The combined population there is 3.6 million people between Charlotte and Knoxville. So next we're going to look at Amarillo, Texas, and my point of bringing up Amarillo is two things that I want to think about. Number one, Amarillo itself in the Panhandle there is only a couple hundred miles away from the southern Rockies in New Mexico. But secondly, Texas itself as an entire state, unsuspectedly, can easily be in the mid-teens to 20s during the winter. Yes, maybe may not be that long, but it is definitely something to consider. In the Texas Panhandle itself, over 500,000 people live there. The next location we'll look at is Tahoe, which is in the California Sierra Nevada mountains. The winter temperatures in Tahoe are in the 20s to 40s with 179 inches of snow. And Tahoe is 120 miles away from Sacramento. So the Sacramento, Fresno, San Joaquin Valley encompasses 4 million people. So essentially 4 million people live 2 hours or 120 miles away from 179 inches of snow. So these are definitely factors that you would want to consider. You might need to look at your city. Some of the ones up north are more obvious. Yes, it's cold there all the time. I specifically cherry-picked these because I believe they're a little more unsuspecting. But as you can see, we've added up 10 million people in population. That could be just 2 hours away from the snow. That could be you having to deal with a situation, which is, again, the whole purpose of this conversation is about you reconsidering what you consider your area of operations and possibly expanding that in your mind. So now let's look at some gear and equipment considerations for two possibilities. One essentially is a low snow, wet, cold area. The other is a high snow, wet, below 30-degree area. So some of the low snow, wet, cold areas, for example, these aren't exclusive, as you guys know, could be Seattle, Texas, parts of California. Some of the gear considerations that you might want to look at would be for jackets, a UF Pro Delta Ace Plus Gen 2 jacket. The extreme cold weather clothing system, we do carry the True Spec Level 2 top and bottom, True Spec H2O top and bottom. OR Pro Convoy Sensor Gore-Tex gloves, insulated boots. We carry the Belleville Kyber. It's a 400-gram Gore-Tex insulated boot. I personally own a pair. They are very good for a less cold area, less cold winter area, I should say, that's wet or light snow. You should consider having a beanie or balaclava. Or OR Pro or Rothco beanie or balaclava. Tactical gear that you might wear, your chest rig, etc. That would just be whatever you normally carry. So now let's look at some of the gear considerations for areas that might have high snow, could be wet but below 30 degrees. These are going to be some of your northern areas of operations, and it could be some specific higher elevation AOs. For jacket considerations, you might want to consider a UF Pro Delta OL 3.0 jacket. It comes with a jacket and pants. Another jacket you might want to consider is the OR Pro, the Ali's Colossus H2O jacket and pant. The extreme cold weather clothing system from True Spec, the Level 2 top and bottom. The True Spec H2O top and bottom. The OR Pro MGS insulated glove. The OR Pro MGS shell Gore-Tex glove. For boots, you would probably want to consider in the higher snow areas the Belleville C775, which is a 600-gram insulated waterproof boot. You'd want to have consideration for a beanie or balaclava, again from OR Pro or Rothco, which is some items that we carry. For camo, you might want to look at the Ott Gear LV insulated Alpine jacket and wind pant, or the True Timber snow parka and pant. It depends on if you want to be more tactical or less tactical. Again, there's a bulky factor when it comes to winter gear, as you know. For some of the tactical line equipment that you might want to look at, you might want to consider the First Spear Viking chest harness or the AR 500 Valkyrie plate carrier, which is Alpine. Another item that would be critical, in my opinion, would be the Revision Snowhawk goggle system. So once again, this is Morgan with winterwarfare.com. So hopefully this video was a help for some guys out there. Again, if you need gear, that's what we do at winterwarfare.com. Check out our website, and hopefully this video was a help for guys out there. Thank you.